I'm waiting for the red light. There we are.
Okay.
I turn it over to you.
All right. Good evening, everybody. My real name is Melinda Heron in the SCA. I'm Duchess Etheldreda. Tonight we're going to talk about how to fit yourself when you're by yourself. I realized as I was doing some Garb over the last couple of weeks as part of my quarantine activities that I was missing a friend, but I knew how to kind of overcome those challenges of not having another person with me to help me fit. And I thought that maybe it might be helpful that other people are having some of those similar challenges, is how do you fit yourself for Garb when you're all by yourself? So that's kind of what we're going to cover tonight. I do want it to be an interactive format. I do have the chat open, and I'm pretty good at kind of looking at that. If you have a question and you don't really want to speak, but also I will pause frequently to allow for any questions from the room. I'm especially interested if people have particular areas or issues with particular types of Garb that they are trying to fit by themselves and need some examples. I'm happy to talk through some particular problems, but I do have a few different techniques that I'm going to kind of talk about tonight, over this next, 45 minutes or so. So welcome everybody. And I'm so excited that we have quite a few people to join. I didn't know how exciting this class would be for everyone. So first I'm going to pause for a minute. Is there anybody who has a particular fitting or a particular issue that they would like us to discuss? And I'll just kind of make a note of it and talk through that as we go.
Boobs, Melinda.
Boobs. Okay. Boobs are a thing. Boobs are hard. For the gentleman on the line, it might be bellies, but it's curves in general are always tricky to fit. So certainly we'll talk through some techniques for that. And I see Emily Adams has asked about Gothic fitted dresses. Now I will tell you that a Gothic fitted dress, I was going to have that as a disclaimer, is the one dress you cannot fit by yourself. There's literally no way for you to do it by yourself. You can do the Gothic version that's unfitted that you would wear a normal bra with by yourself, but trying to fit your own or create your own pattern out of a Gothic fitted dress by yourself is pretty much impossible because there are...
Like a Cohardy?
Yeah, that's the code Hardy. Yeah, but there are some stuff that you can do. I see that, Emily, so that you understand, and that's good. Because there are parts of, if anyone's ever watched a Gothic fitted dress fitting, you actually get really physical and you end up standing over the person and pulling things up and, doing all kinds of crazy gymnastics that you can't do by yourself. But these techniques that I'm going to show you tonight will work for the version of the Gothic dress that is unfitted. Is there any other particular areas that people are struggling with? Hey, I know we're just getting started, so you haven't really missed much. So, okay, so let's talk first about fitting in general, because I think that that's like a hard thing for people to think about. I always say when I teach sewing is actually easy. Sewing is no big deal. If you know how to use your sewing machine, it's follow along on the line, and either you're using seam allowance or you're following a line or whatever you're doing. And that's not the part when people say they're struggling with sewing that they're actually struggling with. They're struggling with patterning. And of course, in the SCA, we don't have, a readily available, sort of a set of patterns that are kind of off the shelf for a lot of the things that we want to make. So patterning is challenging, and then fit, which is often the part where people fall down. So even though there are a few really very good vendors out there who are selling SCA kind of style patterns and SCA appropriate patterns, then you make the dress and it still doesn't look quite great because you're like, gosh, you just don't have the flexibility of fit options. So when you're fitting, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, your issues, you might have boobs, you might have, other types of curves are not going to be the same as everyone else. And some of the issues can be, maybe you've got one shoulder that's a little higher than the other. I have a couple of friends who had that problem, or you've got, maybe some uneven hips or things like that can be a little bit more challenging. The biggest thing to remember with each of those challenges is honestly patience. And whether that's someone who's helping you with it or who's not, it's about being willing to try a pattern multiple times. I always recommend to people that when you're going to make a garment for the first time, make it out of some trash fabric. You can get some old sheets at the Goodwill store for like $1 or $2, and they make fantastic patterning fabric. So make it one time first for yourself before you actually make it out of your good fabric, because that's where you'll start to make your adjustments and learns. So I'm going to pause right out there just in case there's any questions that are popping up. And I'm going to drink Diet Mountain Dew because that's what I'm obsessed with.
I actually have a question which you may intend to cover.
Mhm.
It's once you've made the adjustments to your practice garment,
Mhm.
then do you take it apart and use that to make your
pattern?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the easiest way, which is one of the other reasons that I recommend making it for the first time out of not your good fabric, because when you're done, you can mark all your seams, and I'm going to show you a little bit of that tonight, and you can take that garment apart, and now it's a pattern for every other dress that you want to make like that. But if you make it out of your good fabric first, you don't want to take that apart because you just, you've made this real nice dress and now you're going to take it all apart. Maybe you've done some embellishments to it and things like that. So yes, I do recommend again, if you make it out of some old sheets, muslin, just really any kind of fabric that you've got, just that's relatively inexpensive, then you do have that pattern. And when you take that apart, just make sure you mark your seams first with a pen so that when you take it apart, you still have those lines. You now have a pattern for future use. Does that make sense? Was that Eleanor?
Yes, thank you. That's great.
Yeah, so I do recommend that. Now, but I'm also going to show you a couple of things that it's not a tragedy if you didn't. So maybe you went to a friend's house and you made your first dress, you were going to your first event, or it was the first time you were sewing, whichever, or you just, whatever reason, you were in a rush and you skipped that step. You can actually take a pattern off of a finished garment. It's harder to do, and it's harder to do accurately. So definitely if you take that pattern or trace those pattern pieces off of a finished garment, you want to make sure that you definitely, the step before you make your next garment is absolutely to make a test dress or test pattern or test garment first, to make sure that you did accurately translate all of those, kind of size fittings and things like that. But you can take it off of a finished garment. It just ends up creating some extra work for you in the future. Okay, so let's talk about, I've got a few garments here. So one of the things that I think is probably the hardest thing to do by yourself is actually hems. I think hems are super hard. It's pretty easy if you put on your garment and then your friend kind of marks, where your hem should be while you're standing there nice and straight for them. That's pretty easy to do. But when you're by yourself, it's a little tricky, because if you bend down to touch your especially if it's a long dress, if it's something that goes all the way to the floor, when you bend down, of course, the garment falls down, and now your hem's either going to be uneven or it's going to be too short or something like that. So there's a couple of tricks that you can use to do that. And I'm going to try and show you by putting on a simple dress. And I gotta take my glasses off or it won't go over my head. Or we'll have tragedies when it goes over my head. So this is just a real simple sort of full-length kind of generic tunic dress that forms the basis for lots of things. And I know it's gonna make people a little bit gizzy, so I'm sorry. I'm gonna try and step way back here so that you can see the all of me. Okay, can everyone still hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, right. So I've got this full-length dress, and if I bend over to go ahead and do this, as soon as I do that, of course, the dress falls funny. It falls weird. It's going to be the wrong length. If I went ahead and marked it without doing something additional, then it's going to end up wonky or not right. So a couple of tricks that I have learned to do is this. So first thing, I'm going to make sure that I'm standing up nice and straight. I have just a standard straight pin in my hand. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down straight. I'm going to make sure that this fabric is straight over my boobs, like I'm feeling myself up here, guys. And I'm going to put a pin. I tend to use the crease right here where my leg bends, only because it's an easily identifiable place that I'm like, yep, it's in the crease. I know where it is. And I'm going to do that first on one side. And then I'm going to do it on the other side. Same thing. I want to feel myself up, make sure my fabric's nice and straight. I'm going to stand up nice and straight. And I'm going to put the pin in the other crease. It's also important to make sure that they're on the same place in your body. And as they're actually not. So and the reason I can tell that is when I put my hands over those pins and kind of just think about it, I realized that this one on my left is actually over to the left. Most people, you know, you can try it on yourself. If you don't look, but kind of close your eyes and sort of think, is that the same spot on your body? Your body will tell you that it is. So I'm gonna go ahead and just make sure that those two are adjusted. They're now kind of at the same spot. And I'm gonna walk a little closer so you can see, hopefully you can see those 2 pins there. I don't have really great vision, so I'm not good at that. I do realize that I have, this one's not quite in exactly the same spot. It's helpful to have a mirror, or you know, a cell phone these days works as a great mirror so that you can do just that. I'm gonna walk up close here. I'm gonna take a look here and go, yeah, not only do they feel the same, they visually look about the same spot, right? So I'm now going to, while I bend over, this is a little trickier, I'm gonna put my fingers here because I want to hold this in place. You can also, I happen to be wearing a pair of jeans, and if you're brave, you can actually even just pin the dress to whatever you're wearing underneath, so that what you want is you don't want this fabric to shift. So now when I bend over, notice that my hem of my dress, whereas before it kind of just kept falling, it doesn't actually fall very far now. Now this is already a hem dress, but if it was all the way on the ground, it doesn't fall too far because I've anchored it someplace. I'm now going to do the same thing. I like to do it one more time around the knee area just to be double sure. So I again will use like the point of my knee. And I'm doing the same thing. I'm smoothing it in between where I've anchored it on my pants here all the way down to my knee. And I'm putting another set of pins in. I'm closing my eyes and going, do they feel like they're on the same spot? They do. And then, I don't know if I can show it to you, right? But I would walk up to a mirror and again, double check and make sure they're in the same space. Now, when I go to do that, again, when I bend over now and I do this last step here, which is, you know, looking at my hem all the way to the ground, I now am only trying to smooth the distance between my knee and the ground as opposed to trying to keep all of this upright and trying to keep it all the way down. And I can go ahead and mark, and you can mark it any way you want, where exactly I want that, that hem to be. And you can mark it with, I use tailor's chalk, you know, you can put I'm just putting pins in right now. And I'm gonna do the front first. I'm gonna put some more pins in. And then from there, I will go ahead and try and do some of the sides. The thing that this requires, this is where that patience kind of comes in, is I'm going to do this multiple times. I'm going to mark that front. I'm going to take the dress off. I'm going to look at it again. Does it look like it's even? Like if you look at this, this particular hem right here, you can see that this right side is way shorter than this left side. That's because I rushed when I did this hem and I was like, yeah, that looks about right. And then when I'm done, I now have this dress that's wonky and uneven because I forgot my first rule of fit, which is patience. So I now have a beautifully stenciled dress that has an uneven, wonky hem. So, you know, that's kind of the mistake that I make. But after I have marked the bottom of this hem, I'll take the dress off. I'm going to lay it out flat, which is, I couldn't figure out how to show that to you guys without it being like really weird. But I'll take a look at it visually. I'll say, look, does it look like it has a nice curve to it or an even curve to it? I will mark it. I will put it back on again. You know, each time I'm kind of doing a little bit more as I go, just until this bottom hem is no longer so uneven. So I'm going to pause right there and ask, take questions. Does that make sense? You can see my whole face. And it looked like I had, nope, I'm hearing silence here. So either that means nobody understands or everyone understands. When I take this off, I'm going to show you a little bit more here. When I talk about the curve, this is important. And many of you may know this already, and some of you may not know this. So the hem of a dress, the hem of a dress or a long tunic is not flat because you're not flat. So as you can see here, if this hem was right, it would look like this. The sides are actually shorter than the middle front, and that's normal. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm starting to fix this. So as you can see here, I need to fix this hem because as I said, it's wonky. This is where I actually pinned it right here. And I'm going to try and get this closer. See how it's starting to make the right curve here? So it's kind of a more gentle curve and not the kind of extreme. But when you look over here at this other side, if these are in the same place, you can see that the left side here is more flat. One of the things that I can do at this point to, again, make sure that those curves end up looking very similar is very simply folding the outfit in half. I hope this makes sense, guys. It's a little weird teaching online. I've taught this in person before, but not this way. So, you know, feel free to ask me questions later too as you're working on your own projects. So when I fold this in half here, and hopefully you can see this okay, you can see how much shorter this left side is than this right side. So one of the other tricks that I can do once I don't have to like make sure that I have all of it exactly right. What I can do is, if we'll have both. Wait, what is this? With
I think some.
Yeah, that yes, there is. I'll show you a little bit of that too. It's a little harder to do by yourself because obviously behind you, but I am going to show you some back porch because I have a back porch back here that needs a little work too. But as I was saying, so one of the things that I can also do at this point, since I have kind of this curve, this front half sort of where I want it, I can actually mark it on, and again, just fold up this other side here. Put a couple of pins in. This is where that patience comes in, and put it back on myself so that I can see whether or not this actually is right. And this is hard. Usually I do this on a flat surface. So that, but I'm trying to make sure that you guys can see what I'm doing. All I've done is just folded over the fabric here and put a couple pins in where I think they need to be married up with this other wonky side. And I'll keep doing that the whole way around until it matches. And then when I put it on, I'll be able to see whether or not it's the right, side. And this is a process of taking it off, putting it on, taking it off, putting it on, taking it off. This is the part where it is definitely harder by yourself than it is with another person to help you because of that, you know, kind of extra. You can't just have somebody walk up and go, hey, you know, you made your hem crooked. Let me fix that, help you fix that. So when I'm done, I'll have kind of a curved hem there. That's, sorry, my fabric's falling down. That's the fold right there of where that fabric sits up. Does that make sense? I'm only getting audio. Hopefully, Emily, you were able to get that back. So that's kind of hem. Now, the other thing that you can do with a hem is if I have a garment already, this is another very similar kind of just basic tunic dress. Notice that the hem on this one is not wonky. It's right. So the other thing that you can do, especially with more simple garments, so this works really well with tunic dresses. Apparently my hair is just going to go wherever it would like to. You can actually use one off of the other. So let me tell you what I mean by that. So I can use the black hem, the dress on the hem on the black dress to actually make the hem on the red dress correct. And the way that you'll do that is lay them together. So I want to make sure that at the top, they start at the same place. And ignore the fact that this is a Penzik dress. Can you tell? You know why this is a Penzik dress? Because see, it's ripped. It's got holes in it. That makes it a Penzik dress. So I want to make sure that my shoulders start at the same place. I would lay this out flat on a table Make sure that they are very smooth and very, you know, there's no wrinkles. And again, just go down to the bottom and use this. I don't know how I'm going to show you this, guys. But hopefully this makes some kind of sense. I would lay the black and I would use the black to mark, again, the red by lining them up and making sure that they were the same. They were the same distance, and they were laid out flat on a board or on a floor or your table or whatever. Making sure that there weren't any wrinkles, and they were kind of coming together at the same place, so that when I got down here to the hem, I could, maybe you can see a little bit better this way. I would go, oh, actually in this particular case, my black dress is longer than my red, but I could still use that same curve to line up the curve. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. So hems are the easiest thing you can do by yourself, even though they are the most time consuming of the things that you can do by yourself. Because of that, the one thing you have to be really sure of is don't rush like I did with that red dress and go ahead and zoop and cut and say, yeah, it's all good. But you have to keep taking it off, you know, keep pinning it, folding it under, putting it back on yourself, stepping back, looking in the mirror, making sure that that looks correct. It's a little trickier in the back. Somebody was asking about those back porches. There's not really I don't really have an easy solution for you. It's the same kind of thing. You're going to put this on and, you know, try and step back as far as you can to see the back. I have very successfully used a full-length mirror and a cell phone to get both kind of images. Because remember, even if you can't see in the cell phone, you can take a video and then look at your video and go, oh no, that doesn't look really all that good. So that's the other trick that I use or have figured out over the last couple of months is I can put my cell phone up and take a video of myself so that I can actually see the back of me looking in the camera. Is kind of the only thing that I found that really kind of gives you that back view so that you can then go, oh, no, I still have that too long or too short or not even. But if you're patient and just keep kind of putting it on, rolling it up, marking it, putting it back, taking it off, kind of do that over and over again, I promise you can actually get a hem that does not look like my red dress all wonky, but looks a little bit more like you need it to be. So fit. The other thing when it comes to fitting the rest of you, there's a couple of things that are important to know. First of all, seams are your friends. So when you have a garment, so this is a traditional medieval kind of style garment, right? With the only thing that I cheated on is I didn't put in an underarm gore. I instead used the modern, you can see it's kind of angled here. If it was an accurately patterned medieval garment, it would have a separate gore here. But when it comes to how you're going to fit this, those seams are kind of your limits. So what I mean by that is, I'm going to put this back on. You can see me doing this a lot tonight. Is what if I want to fit it better around my body or around my boobs or around my bootay. And this is again for a medieval aesthetic. So if this was a modern garment, we can see, and I wanted this to be tight, I would probably put a seam in here, right? You guys all have a dress or two or an outfit where you've got a seam that kind of runs, they call them princess seams, that kind of runs, you know, sort of on this curved line here. It's not really something they did in the Middle Ages. In order to maintain that medieval aesthetic, you're going to just take them in on these seams themselves. It does mean that there are some limitations to the kind of looks that you can get. But that's also important. If you want your garment to look authentically medieval, then you need to kind of stick with the limits that they have. And did somebody just have another question? Okay, looks like maybe no. So that medieval aesthetic becomes really important. It does mean that there are, however, a couple of tricks to that. So if I was going to fit this myself, and there's a couple of things to note, notice that these sleeves are too long. right? They're super long. They're almost up to the end of my hands here. And it's kind of wing and bat-like here, right? So this is another exercise in patience. So let's talk about the sleeve length first. So sleeve lengths, you want to make sure it's going to give you that length when you bend your arm. So if I was going to make this shorter, it's pretty easy to actually just fold it over and see where it comes to. So with my hand down, you can see this, I folded this over, and you can see it's normal, but and it's still okay when I bend my arm. You just want to double check it both directions so that you have the room. If I made it too short, it'll be even shorter when I fold it. That's pretty simple. But what do I do about these bats? These sort of bigger bat wings here, right? This is, again, something that you can do by yourself. It's a little much hard. It's harder. But what I'm going to do is I'm kind of holding it. Hopefully you can see that. I'm holding it. I kind of think that I'd like it to be about here. Notice that I started at the elbow. If I take it in too much here, or especially too much here, see if I take it in too much, see how tight it now becomes across the arm. It's actually pulling the whole garment the whole way around. I need to start at a point when I'm thinking about fitting it where to make sure, to make sure that I still have enough room for that bend. So I'm actually right at the bend of my elbow. I'm holding it with my other hand. That's all I'm doing right now. So I'm holding it right here, and I have it actually, there's my arm. Hopefully you can see that. I'm holding it right at the end, as tight as it could be across my arm, right? If I'm holding it that tight, notice how it starts to bind on the elbow and back around. Gothic fitted dresses, there's whole other tricks for sleeves, so please don't translate this to those more fitted garments. But for a loose one, it's too tight. It's now going to pull it across, and as it's pulling it across, it's actually going to distort the fit the whole way down because you've got this force pulling your whole dress over to the side like that. So I know it's too tight. So you can just sort of experiment with your own hands and go, okay, that's too tight. When I hold it just a little bit, so here's my elbow here and here's my hand here, just a little bit looser, and I go to bend. Notice I still get some, it gets, obviously tighter across that, but it's not pulling my garment off my shoulders. At that point, what I need to do is put a pen there or mark it with a pen or something, like I usually have a longer pen. I should have brought one with me, where I'll actually kind of just mark it a little bit there. But you can also, if you're not sure how to mark it, you can take it. Here's the trick that I used on myself earlier today. I took my measuring tape, going to hold the measuring tape. I know that the measuring tape is at, I'm holding it right at a number that I can see. So right there, it's got being held at close, right at the edge of my sleeve is at 20 inches. When I hold it to the point that I want it, so I've got it a little bit longer, I can see that my thumb is at, it looks like about the 21 1/4. So I need to take, or 3/4, excuse me, right here. So I know that so now I know, I'm like, okay, at the point of the sleeve here, I'm going to take this off and I'm going to mark and pin it 1 3/4 in. Does that make sense to everybody? That's a little hard, I think. All right, so, okay, Albert's not. All right, cool. So this is, again, where that patience comes in, because I'm going to take this off. I'm going to mark that point. I'm going to pin it closed with my pin and put the dress back on, and then I'm going to test it again. I'm going to say, okay, does that work? If that works, I'm now going to move over to another point. I'm going to say, okay, I know where this elbow sleeve needs to come in. I'm going to move over a little bit farther. I'm going to do exactly the same thing again. I'm going to use my measuring tape. I'm going to kind of, keep doing that where I go, okay, that needs to be another 1.5 inches. And I'm going to do that the whole way. I usually will go down first and then up, because down is where you get the most binding. So if this is too tight here, that's where you're going to get the most problems with the sleeve. So you kind of need to work out this part first before you work this part out. But after you've done that 3 or 4 times, you'll start to see exactly where the line of that sleeve needs to come in. And now you can pin it, mark it with your chalk, go ahead and sew it. But I can do that on both sides. And that's an important point, which I should make. You should do that on both sides before you sew anything. Because if I have this side, remember if it's too tight over here, I'm pulling my dress this way. And then what happens? Right now my dress is off center. This side is too tight. So you need to do both sides before you sew anything. And that is another one of those fundamental rules. So number 1, be patient. Number 2, always do everything on both sides before you sew anything closed. Because once you've sewn it, you now have to take that seam out, and that's a lot of extra work. But because what happens on the right side of your body impacts what happens on the left side of your body, you have to make sure that it's even on both sides and that it's fitting correctly before you commit to sewing, and definitely before you cut anything off of the dress, make sure that it's the same on both sides and that it's even. So that's your sleeves. Sleeves naturally go into the body here. So as you can see right here, so here appears my armpit. Here is where this, sort of sleeve kind of cuts into the body. Now, to some extent, I need some of that because this is a more worky kind of dress, and I want to move. It's not like a fitted Gothic or coat hardy kind of things, or any of your later sort of 15th, 16th, century garments that are very, very fitted and kind of do somewhat restrict your movement. So, but I can do the same thing that I have done with the sleeves with this. It's a little easier because I can actually grab it with my hand, but I'll grab it with my hand, put a mark where I think it needs to be, and kind of go down. Hopefully you can see. I'm sorry, guys. We'll get closer and kind of go, okay, I think it needs to come in here, and it needs to come in here, and it needs to come in here. I will take it off one side, and you can see where these marks are. I'm not going to go through all of that right now, but I would take it off and again, put my pins in so that I can hold it, put it back on, then do the other side. And again, it's that same process, always being patient, marking and then taking off, making sure that it looks right, putting it back on. And it's back to that same rule. What I don't want to do is take all of it out of this side and not take any out of that side. So what I'm going to really actually try and do as I do my waist, and this is how you get around boobs, is making sure that you are continually taking it up. It doesn't have to be 100% even, but fairly even as you come down the garment. Now, if you are, so let me pause there for a minute. Does that make sense to everybody? There's another garment and make sure that okay. So I'm just trying to read those messages. I don't see very well. So as I go down, but there's a point at which I have, especially if I have a lot of bootay, as somebody asked about, a lot of caboose back here, or in some cases, just the way your boobs sit, taking it in on the sides is not going to be enough. So even though there is not a seam down the back here, I can still take it in, and I'm going to do it exactly the same way, where I'm holding it. I can mark it with a pin. Try not to stick yourself with it as I go down. And I'm actually kind of just feeling this as it goes down. And this is where I get a little, I'm trying to keep it straight down the middle, right where the crack of my butt is, as a guide for this. But I can mark it in the back. And notice if I mark it in the back, it also has, oops, I forgot I had pins on that side. It has a nice sort of shape for the front. So when I'm doing a fitting, especially for the first time, I will kind of I'll usually start with the sides and see how the sides look. But if I don't like how it's looking, I might move to the back. This is, again, where the #1 rule is patience, where you're going to kind of try a bunch of different things, but you can sort of do it yourself because you can reach all of these spots. But it's also the kind of thing that, look, a husband, a kid, a neighbor can also do, because it's not you know, once you start to show that all I'm doing is pulling the fabric evenly here on my seam and putting a pin in, it's not that, you know, it's not like it's some really advanced fitting technique. It's just, you know, put some pins in until it looks like, it's literally put pins in until it looks the way you want it to look. But I'm going to give you one more piece of caution. At this point, I have it really nice and tight. It's all fitted right around. Guess what? I can't pull this over my head. So I may be able to pull this over my head if it was sewn, because the pins, of course, are going to pop out when I pull it up over my head. If I want to try that, I can. All I have to do is take my chalk, hopefully you can see, and mark right where the pins are, and then take out the pins and then pull it off my head. Again, it's just like if it's a garment like this, which is a pull on and off over your head, you need to have enough space that it'll get up over your boobs. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. So I happen to know that I just know by experience that I have taken this dress in too much to actually be able to get it off. But you're literally going to learn it just that way by experience. You'll go, okay, I think that looks good. I like where it's at. Let me take it off. And when you go to take it off, you'll have pins popping out. You'll have things like that. I actually pinned it to my shirt in the back, which is all the kinds of things that are going to happen as you with the tunic, with these kind of tunics, you need a little bit more space to pull it over your head. And hopefully that makes sense to everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about necklines last, but before I move on to necklines, did that answer? Is there any other questions that people have, or any other things that they're like a little would like me to go over just a little bit while I have this dress on? Okay, I'm going to take silence as good. Necklines. Necklines, I think, are one of the things that people are most intimidated by, but honestly, necklines are one of the easiest things. First of all, chalk is your friend. This is actually just a comment about this is tailor's chalk, which has wax mixed in it. It just means that it irons off, but regular chalk, whatever kind of marking chalk you have, is good. But necklines are hard because people just think like I don't know where to mark it or how to go. This is a traditional sort of like small keyhole neckline right here. But if I wanted this to be, say, for whatever reason, I wanted it to have I wanted to show some more bling, right? I wanted to show some more booty. I don't want it to be up this high. Again, I'm going to look in the mirror and I'm going to go, okay, this is where really feeling your body is good. Cause I'm like, you know, visually, maybe I think, oh, it'll be great here. But as I realize that's kind of in between my boobs, and maybe I don't want to show that much skin, you can kind of feel, and again, I'm not actually looking, step back here so you can see, I'm not actually looking at myself. I'm actually using my body senses. I'm thinking about, where is my hand? Okay, that seems about right. And then I'm going to mark it and I'm going to walk up a little closer and I'm going to go, yeah, that seems to be about a good spot for that neckline. And then I'm going to go ahead, and this part I'll usually go ahead and look and I'll be like, all right, let me draw a neckline. I'm going to try and make this deeper so that you can see it. Right, so I've got a neckline drawn. And I'm going to actually just, you do have to remember and think about how does it going to connect to the shoulder up here. I don't want it there, I want it here. All right, so I've got a neckline. I think it looks pretty good where it is. Oh gosh, how do I make this other side look the same as this side? And that's where I think people really struggle. There's actually a pretty easy trick. So I'm gonna run my finger out here and I'm gonna run it out here on the left side where I don't have it drawn yet. And again, I'm not looking at it. I'm just thinking, are these two things in the same spot? I think they are. So now I'm going to mark with my finger. I'm now going to go up a little bit higher. Same thing. I'm thinking, okay, is this the same height? Is it about the same height? I actually even do this kind of technique if I'm doing it, if I'm drawing a neckline on someone, I will do the same thing, only I'll just put my finger there and I'll be like, hey, are these two spots, do they feel like they're the same place? And I'm just going to continue to follow this side here that I have drawn up and continue to go, think to myself, wait, is that about the same place? Yes, and make a mark. And all you're doing is kind of making a zigzag or a dashed line as you go up. Those are definitely not in the same spot. And just thinking to yourself as you're going, so that when I connect all those dots, you can see that my neckline is actually perfectly even. So that's like how you can actually mark your own neckline or mark the neckline on somebody else and make that neckline be, end up looking even and not being all wonky or crooked. It works out actually pretty well across the board. I think, what time is it? 7:45. Those are the major things that I wanted to cover. It is possible, I should probably mention this. The reason I didn't talk about doing a seam here in the middle, which is another place you could fit at. This is where, honestly, this is just sort of a medieval aesthetic. There's two reasons you don't do that. One, I'm going to go ahead and show it to you right now. You end up with this weird, as it comes up over the boob, you're going to end up with something weird going on here. It's not going to look really smooth and neat. It's going to draw everyone's eye to the middle of your garment. It also is not terribly medieval because like this is most, up until you get into sort of corsetry kind of like things, which is what the fitted Gothic dresses are, you don't really get center lines as frequently, and certainly not fitted central lines. So unless it's a specific garment that calls for buttons or lacings or something up the front, you usually don't do any kind of fitting in the front, even if your boobs are bigger. If you've got, if you're finding that this is not fitting right, because you've got really beautiful goddess boobs, then the solution, which is not, it's a little counterintuitive, is actually to make your underarm gore bigger. The whole point of an underarm gore, which is a lovely little diamond-shaped piece of fabric that goes in here, if you are having problems with the way this is fitting here, it's because you don't have enough stretch across here. And the reason you have a diamond shape right there is because now it will stretch. Just in case there's anybody on the phone who doesn't know about bias versus straight, I will cover that real quick right now. Garment fabric is woven like a straights lines down and then other lines that go across. So that means if you are on the straight of the fabric, it doesn't pull very much that direction, or side to side, it doesn't pull very much. If you're on the angle, see how much that now stretches? That's called bias. And that's what those underarm gores will do for you across the boobs here. So if I'm actually having trouble with the way this is laying across my boobs, that's what I would do. I would actually make those underarm gores just a little bit bigger. And this is again where that cheap sheet, kind of test pattern means you can work out a lot of these things by yourself. Okay, that's kind of the bulk of what I wanted to or had planned to cover. So I'm going to pause. Are there any, does anybody have any specific questions or specific garments that they're having issues with, or specific fitting children versus fitting adults, anything like that that I can talk about in the last 10 minutes? I'm very comfortable with silence on conference call.
When you talk about using the cheap fabric for the initial, how close how much should we be concerned about the thickness or the tightness of the weave being similar to what we hope to use in the final garment?
Yeah, so the only time that will, for most of your linen garments, it's not going to matter. Your average sheet fabric will function pretty much just the same way linen would. For the most part, as long as you, well, let me pause there for a minute and make one caveat to that statement. They do make sheets with Lycra or stretch in them, you know, like modern sheets. You want a 100% cotton sheet. As long as it's 100% cotton sheet, it will function pretty much like linen will function. And so you don't need to worry too much about there being a difference. 100% rayon sheets also will function pretty similarly. It's just if you've got one of those sheets that have, you can find sheets now that have a little bit of Lycra in them or spandex or some of the stretchy fabrics, because it means that your sheets don't wrinkle just the same as every other garment that we put plastic in.
And just to clarify for people who may not know, so like 100% cotton jersey, though cotton is not what we want to use, right? Because like those t-shirt material sheets have become more popular, I think. That would be a problem.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. I forget about those, but yes, you're right. Those things that feel like a t-shirt. You want something that feels a little stiffer, that doesn't have, because the 100% cotton jersey sheets, jersey is actually a weave type, means that we have woven it so that it's very stretchy. Does that make sense? So where it will fall apart for you is if you are using like a really heavy jacquard. Some people call them brocades, but like a really heavy fabric that you often use, especially for sort of like 16th century, 15th, 16th century, like later, you know, really fancy outfits. Those really stiff, heavy kinds of fabric, the sheets are too thin. So absolutely, you know, a regular, normal, not cotton jersey, but 100% cotton sheet will work just fine if your garment's going to be linen. It will also work fine if your garment is going to be a light wool, like a really thin, like suiting wool, like you typically use for fitted Gothic dress. It'll be fine for that. It's as the fabric gets kind of to coat weight. You can think of it as like if I was going to buy a wool coat, then that sort of falls apart a little bit. What you can do is you can still use that cotton sheet for your pattern. But what you'll need to do, and then I always say, look, it's going to be the first time. If you just paid $35 a yard for wool cashmere, it should never be your first thing that you cut, or even maybe your second thing. I would make something out of some $15 a yard wool first before I went up to really expensive wool. I would try it out of a cheaper wool, but another wool to try again to just make sure that it's okay before you get to really expensive fabric that potentially you'll be ruined. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Someone asked about using muslin.
Yeah, so muslin is the same as a cotton. It's a great question, Albert. That is also actually, since I'm not doing this anymore, I'm going to move this up here so I feel less like I'm shouting across the room. The muslin works just fine. It's just like a cotton sheet in that it will work really very well for anything that's out of linen. And most of your wools, it's just not until you get to like the coat weight wools, the flannel weight wools, or a really heavy kind of brocade fabric that you might find that you need. Those heavier fabrics will need to be slightly bigger than your muslin model will be. Does that make sense? So not a lot. It's usually not much more than 1/4 of an inch on each panel to a 1/2 inch tops for those heavier weight fabrics. It's just that it's going to drape. Great, thanks, Barbara. It's just going to drape a little differently, which is always tricky. And again, you should never be jumping to really expensive fabric until you're really confident that your pattern is correct. Not to say that I haven't done it before, because I have, and I've ruined lots of good fabric over the years. But it's just a matter of like, what's your appetite for destruction, I suppose. Is there another question in the chat here? Okay, no, same thing. Anything else? Is there any other? I didn't talk, like this is a bigger neckline. If I was going to pattern and cut like a really tight neckline, I wanted this to be really, really tight up here. How I would do that is, if I can get my measuring tape out from underneath my computer, I would measure my neckline, right? So it looks about 12 inches, right? I actually need my circle to be smaller than 12 inches because I'm going to fold over, you know, the neckline here and make a hem, right? Or in this particular case, this one's actually faced. Either way, I'm going to take away some portion of it. So you can always make things bigger, but you can never make things larger. So I will usually, so that's a 12-inch. I would probably cut a 9-inch diameter circumference circle to try, and then put it on. Again, I'm going to do it out of some of my test fabric and adjust from there, as opposed to starting with a 12-inch circle. If you start with a 12-inch circle, you're going to end up with a bigger neckline. I happen to not like my necklines to be up close to my neck. So that's kind of why this is a little bit bigger, but a lot of people will want a tighter neckline. And that's the trick to getting a tighter neckline, is make your circle smaller than the actual circumference of your neck. Okay. I am on Facebook as Etheldreda. I'm always open to questions. You can certainly, you know, if you just pop up on the East Kingdom page, I'm always open to questions. I'm more than happy to even jump on a video conference call with somebody and look at a specific garment that you're working on right now and trying to figure out. I'm happy to do that at any time, because I love to teach. And it's a little bit more challenging when we're now kind of trying to do it over conference calls, but I think it's a great set of skills we're all learning, excuse me. So thanks everybody. I really appreciate that y'all showed up for my class. I hope it was helpful.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful. And I am officially going to stop recording now.
All right, great. Thanks. Everyone have a good evening. Be safe out there.
Belinda,
Wait, one more quick question.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Was that Etheldreda, ETHEL space DREDA?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Yep. All right.
Belinda.
Yeah. Hi, Heather. What's up?
I wanted to